It is a being containing contradictions, as it is called a guardian deity of the net, despite being a virus attribute. And if by any chance its balance is lost, it is possible for it to become a dangerous being. As the other heroes had gathered around finally, after the defeat of Imperialdramon, the two rookie Digimon that laid on the ground were now the focus of attention, as the knights had wondered what would happen next. However, for some of them, the choice was obvious. As for Ulforce Vidramon and for Craniumon, they knew what they needed to do, as because of Imperialdramon's influence, the destabilization of the Metal Empire had led to the damage and destruction of so much other areas, thanks to Metal Greymon being able to take some power and take them away, and also the Monarch Knights storming and destroying other areas alongside them. And for Ulforce Vidramon, due to the damage Imperialdramon's rampage started at the beginning of its birth, and more importantly, from the loss of the four great dragons, it knew that its best option was to finally end the madness. As both of them approached, however, Omegamon and Chaos Galantmon stopped them in their tracks, as they were actually surprised by this action. However, Omegamon made it clear that Yggdrasil told it that it could do whatever it wanted in terms of dealing with this threat, and in the case of the two children, it did believe that the negative power and the dark influence was finally gone, that they should simply just be Digimon now, just like anyone else. And for Chaos Galantmon, it informed Craniumon that it still had a task to finish out, and if those two are the key to it. So, it would stop it if anything were to happen. As both were shocked, they would demand that the madness needed to end. That if both of them were to remain, there was a chance that could lead to the destruction that they had just suffered all over again. However, this was something that Omegamon and Chaos Galantmon were not going to abide by. However, to Lord Nightmon and to Leopardmon, their surprises were met as both Ulforce and Craniumon clashed with the other two, as Omegamon simply just put out its blade and Chaos Galantmon used its shield. They were now locked in a battle of wills, as the other two knights didn't know what to do, as on one hand they both agreed, but simultaneously they both disagreed, as Leopardmon's feelings for the loss of Azulongmon and the loss of its other devas did make it feel that they should be punished. However, if the defender of the net himself and Omegamon agreed and said that they were purified, well, at this point, why would it argue, as it had saved them all? And for Lord Nightmon, if that was true, Omegamon would be the best one to take care of these two, as obviously no one here was stronger than it. But these two knights wanted to prove themselves, as everyone here was already tired from their massive battle with Imperialdramon before, but they weren't willing to give an inch, as their wills would push forward. As sparks began to fly from both sides, it was clear that neither of them would want to surrender, and neither of them were going to, as both the rookie Digimon simply lay in the balance. As they would dash off of each other, they realized that it was best to make a stand, as on one side Chaos Galantmon would face Craniumon, the other Omegamon, as both of them made it clear that this was where they would draw the line in the sand, that the children's protection were more important, and ultimately, if they could do what they needed to do, then the digital world would have what it wanted. But for Ulforce and for Craniumon, this was something that needed to be tested, as their faith and their anger need to be fulfilled, as the rest of their areas were counting on them to avenge all those that had been lost by the dark forces, but more importantly than that, to make sure the madness never happened again. However, sometimes fate has a way of playing tricks, and in this case, the fate decided to join them, as from the sky descended another figure. To the shock of many others, it looked just like Chaos Galantmon. However, it wasn't, this being the normal Galantmon itself, in its red and white clothing, as when it arrived to touchdown, the armor shined, as it shocked everyone as it stood directly in front of the children, which drew the attention of the other knights, as they wondered what this newcomer would do, as they were unsure if it was a friend or a foe. However, they didn't know what to expect. But to their surprise, Galantmon just started to talk, as it would inform everyone that some updates and changes had happened to the digital world after Imperialdramon's defeat. Even though it had only been so recent, the rest of the digital world was already feeling the shock factor from this massive problem. As now, Chaos Galantmon and Omegamon itself decided to stand down, as there was no point in fighting at this current moment, as this new Digimon was fresh, so at least hearing it out was the key, as both Craniumon and Ulforce decided to do the same. After arriving to the Monarch Knight Castle, Galantmon was informed that Lord Knightmon had left in order to protect and join in the fight against Imperialdramon. However, Galantmon would have loved to have come, but it had to get the approval of Prince Mamimon, which is its lord, that if it was able to go, it would have been able to help turn the tides against Imperialdramon. However, with the timely arrival of Omegamon, finally, it was able to help turn the tides and change the battle in the favor of the heroes. However, this is where the forces would need to be informed of what was going on, as it was obvious that by the end of the battle against Imperialdramon, that Grey Knightsmon itself, and with the taking of the remaining dark forces, were not done with their missions, and they were not done with whatever they were trying to accomplish, as Galantmon would inform Craniumon that the Metal Empire had been attacked, as in return for the Metal Key, Grey Knightsmon stormed the area with an unknown Digimon, one of berserk power, which took out all of the main defenses for the Metal Empire, as they're searching the key for the key now. This leaving Craniumon angry, as its leaving was only temporary so they could stop Imperialdramon, but, as they say, the fight never ends. In the case of Ulforce Vidramon, it'd be informed that the remaining forces that had been broken off had split off into different areas. However, they headed to the plains, as this would be some worry, as Ulforce Vidramon isn't there to protect them. And Galantmon would inform him that if it were to return now, it could at least stop the forces from messing with the younger Digimon, as many young Digimon make their home in Ulforce Vidramon's area, which is why it is so protective of its home. And it would need to go back in order to stop them had any of the Dark Force Digimon decided to rally there, because it would be very easy for them to pick it over. This would then timely arrival with both Leopardmon landing in front of Ulforce Vidramon and Lord Knightmon joining Craniumon, as both would tell them that they would go with them respectfully in order to aid them in against the threats that would loom, as Lord Knightmon knows that if Metal Greymon had returned with Dark Knightmon, that there was a chance that the Monarch Knights could join it alongside Craniumon in order to stop the threat, as it seems that it's in both of their best interests, as the Monarch Knight key is still in the possession of Dark Knightmon. And Leopardmon respectfully would tell Ulforce Vidramon that this is to pay it back for making sure that it would join its alliance some time ago, as before it wasn't sure that it would join it as a friend, but now it wants to return the favor to its ally. As both Ulforce Vidramon would be calmed down, as well as Craniumon, knowing that their powerful allies were worth this effort and endeavor, that by coming here to stop Imperialdramon, they may be actually doing more good than bad. However, this is where Omegamon would chime in, telling the knights that no matter what has happened today, that they will always be in the favor of Yggdrasil after protecting the digital world in its stint. As all four of the knights would look over to Omegamon, they would see that it meant what it said, as proudly the defender of the digital world had acknowledged them. As they would go off on their own, it was clear that this was going to be the beginning of something new. However, this is where it shifted, as believing that Galantmon had not come to fight, both Chaos Galantmon and Omegamon had believed that this was going to be a simple ending, as it would just leave. However, Galantmon made itself clear the moment the others left that it came here in order to destroy the children, as I believed that their chaos had destabilized the digital world far too much, and even before knowing Omegamon would return, it would have stepped in and defeated Imperialdramon had needed to be. However, Chaos Galantmon looked a little surprised, as with its boasting, it didn't believe that it actually possessed the power enough to stop Chaos Galantmon alone. But Duke or Galantmon actually said it with conviction, meaning that it must be a lot stronger than it's leading on. However, it would make a deal, as it knows the stories of the ancients about Omegamon, and it knows that now that Chaos Galantmon did help in defeating the last Imperialdramon. It would make a deal that if it were to battle both of them and win, that it would decide after that if it wanted to harm the children at all. However, for both Omegamon and Galantmon, if Chaos Galantmon and Omegamon were able to defeat them or defeat him alone in battle, he would cede and allow them to do whatever they pleased. But this would be something he would need to test, as in order to test how good the heroes really are, he wants a piece of either of them. Surprising none other, the one who feels the most responsible was Omegamon, as Omegamon would say that if it had not been for its absence in the digital world, this threat may have been stopped. So, in order to prove itself and make sure it is the hero that it is claimed to be, it accepts the challenge from Galantmon, as they would prepare on both sides. So Omegamon and Galantmon would make their first clash, as this would echo throughout the digital world and digital universes, as this fight has happened somewhere before, as both would prepare. Galantmon, being a chivalrous Digimon, did ask if Omegamon was tired at all after this massive battle against Imperialdramon. However, it said it did not matter. Being tired isn't what a hero does. Tired is something the hero is after he wins. As Omegamon would at least be respected by Galantmon for that, as their battle was about to begin. As Chaos Galantmon was not too far behind Galantmon, the children were still asleep, as it put up its shield and, grabbing its own spear, it was waiting, as it knew that if Omegamon were to fail, it would be next to fight, as the chivalry in Galantmon, but as well as the respect in the knights themselves, did not want them to fight in an unnamed battle, as although it could have fought both of them at once, they did believe that this wasn't fair, as Galantmon had been respectful and at least gave them the option. So it was decided, as both sides would charge in, as it was finally time to decide who was the stronger of the two. As the clash of shield and blade proved that Omegamon and Galantmon respectively were both strong combatants. However, it did not mean that either would back down. As shockingly enough, they would respond to each other's attacks almost as if they read each other's minds. After they jumped off, the Supreme Cannon would be fired. However, the Duke Galantmon's shield would light up and fire back. When both beams clashed, it caused a massive explosion between the two, which is what was shocking the battlefield, as the desert would be turned into a battlefield once again. As both of the knights would jump off, and they would create distance between each other, showing that although Omegamon has had massive time to train and being much older than the others, has had combat experience beyond the others, Galantmon itself is no slouch, as whoever has trained it has clearly shown it that it knows exactly what it needs to do in order to defeat an enemy of such caliber. As both prepared to charge in, as now it was time to see the power of both of their blades. As with Omegamon and Galantmon meeting in the middle, the shockwaves were impressive, as the desert was now turned once again into a battlefield, as the most powerful knight under Yggdrasil would meet one of the most powerful warriors of the digital world, and this one hadn't even joined in the battle against Imperialdramon, as Omegamon was definitely impressed. As Chaos Galantmon would look down at the children and know that this was going to take a long time, as neither side was going to give an inch. As barrages of attacks from either side would continue, the battle would last all day. And as dusk began to approach over the horizon, it was clear that this battle would eventually need to come to an end. As to the surprise of everyone, Omegamon, although fatigued from its battle, had fought all day without stop, and seemed to be enjoying itself. As the sun was about to touch down over the horizon, it was clear that both sides wanted to finish this fight, as although they didn't look too worse for wear, they did have scuffs all over their armors, indicating that their battle had, at least in some way, pressured both sides. And finally, it was time, as both would scream to the top of the area, "Let's finish this," as it was clear that both sides wanted to end this fight in one big swoop. As it seemed that both sides were charging in, they were getting to the point where they were about to meet. However, to the surprise of Galantmon, Omegamon dropped its weapons, leaving itself unguarded, as if tempting it to take an unguarded shot. And very much inches away, Galantmon stopped, as it was about to pierce through the chest of Omegamon. Once it claimed why it would do this, Omegamon said the battle was already over the moment that it had gained respect for Galantmon. There was no reason to continue to fight. Both of them understood exactly what this meant. And since Omegamon could not be overtaken, there's no reason two children would easily be able to stop him. And with his help, the two children would live up to the expectations he was about to set out for them. Galantmon was far impressed as it looked at Omegamon, understanding exactly what makes it such a powerful Digimon, but more importantly, why it's the defender of the net. Although it seems harsh and unfair by the aspects of many in the terms of Yggdrasil and the forms of the other Digimon, it isn't, as it's still at its core a part of the digital world like them. As Chaos Galantmon would be relieved, the two children that had finally woken up had been wandering and looking, as they were unsure exactly what would happen, but when they woke up, they just knew that there was a bunch of dust flying everywhere, as it seems that their reversion has left them with missing memories, as all they did was ask Chaos Galantmon where were they, as Chaos Galantmon would tell them to not worry, as they'll be okay, and just to wait. As both of them were up and about, wondering exactly what was going to happen to them. They were unsure, as with both the knights that had been battling finally putting their weapons down, it was time for them to make amends, as both told them that they respected each other and ultimately that this would be where they would end their battle for now. As Galantmon turned to leave and eventually did, it told Omegamon that if it ever needed anything, it knew where to find it, and that they would meet again someday. As all Omegamon could say is, usually it was the one to say goodbyes. However, it said, in time they'll meet again, and with doing so, it enjoyed this fight thoroughly, as Galantmon would be told that it was a true defender of the net. As Chaos Galantmon would bring the children over to Omegamon, the discussion was made of what to do. As Omegamon would tell Chaos Galantmon that if what was said is true, then the fight is not over, and these two will be key in order to helping stop the threat that's coming. As Chaos Galantmon understood, as it said, yes, indeed, they'll need to be trained, and they'll need to be taught well, in order to protect the digital world. Omegamon said that since its absence, much had happened, and destruction had reigned across the digital world. However, that wasn't going to be the case anymore, as it would stay in order to figure out something new that needed to be done and organize some type of defense, maybe a group, in order to protect the digital world in its absence, or in order to make sure the digital world always had guardians willing to step in and protect it. But it'd have to discuss that with Yggdrasil. As finally, the group would set out, as Omegamon would turn, as well as Chaos Galantmon, to the children, looking at them, knowing that ahead the long road begins. But for both of them, the beginning of a new world is opening up. And to protect their digital world and protect the world in its whole, they would need to figure out new ways to deal with threats, as the battle will rage on. However, this is where this story ends. For now. It is in the fog of war that we usually forget that those who fight in them are still usually possessing of mortal beliefs. The cold-hearted exterior that is usually given off by war is nothing to ever be scoffed at. For those who are sent into battle will never be the same, and those who end up protecting others will always have a strong attitude. And sometimes we forget that even the innocent or those to be condemned aren't always going to look the way that we want. And in the case of Wormmon and Vmon, They have much to atone for. However, the question is, will they at least understand what happened and return to the way that they were? Or will they grow and become something far greater? This is Brad from the Ad Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.